We've been talking about the fact that most of what our brain does is not only outside of our conscious awareness, but pretty much outside of our control. So what does this mean for responsibility?
Well, I think what it means is that when we look at something like the legal system, something like blameworthiness is actually the wrong question for us to ask. I mentioned before that brains end up being an end result of a very complicated process of genes intertwining with environment. So in the end, when there's a brain standing in front of the judge's bench, it doesn't matter for us to say, okay, well, are you blameworthy? To what extent are you blameworthy? To what extent was it your biology versus you? Because it's not clear that there's any meaningful difference between those two things anyway. So I'm not saying this forgives anybody. We still have to take people off the street if they're breaking the laws. But what it means is that asking the question of blameworthiness isn't where we should be putting our time. Instead, all we need to be doing is having a forward-looking legal system where we say, what do we do with you from here? We don't care how you got here because we can't ever know. It might have been in utero cocaine poisoning, childhood abuse, the lead paint on the walls, and all of these other things that influence your brain development, but we can't untangle that, and it's not anybody's fault. It's not your fault or anybody else's, but we can't do anything about it. So all we need to do is say, given the kind of person you are now, what is the probability of recidivism? In other words, how likely are you to transfer this behavior to a future situation and reoffend? And then we can predicate sentence length on that probability of reoffense. And equally as importantly, along with customized sentencing, we can have customized rehabilitation. So there are lots of things that can go wrong with people's brains that we can usefully address and try to help people instead of throwing everybody in jail. As it stands now, 30% of the prison population has mental illness. Not only is that not a humane way for us to treat our mentally ill and make a de facto healthcare system, but it's also not cost effective. And it's also criminogenic, meaning it causes more crime. Because everybody knows when you put people in jail, that limits their employment opportunities, it breaks their social circles, and they end up coming back to the jail more often than not. So it's very clear how the legal system should be straightening itself out just to make itself forward-looking and saying, okay, all we need to do is get good at assessing risk into the future. Now, one caveat I need to make very clear is we will never be able to predict people's behaviors because life is too complicated and crime is contextual. You can take the exact same person and put him in different circumstances, and in one circumstance he'll thrive as a CEO, and in another circumstance he'll get arrested for 30 years for being a drug dealer. And it's the same person, it's just a matter of what neighborhood they found themselves in and what circumstances. So we're never going to be able to predict crime entirely. Nonetheless, it is the case that brains are not the same as one another, and some people are very dangerous. Some people are really bad seeds that prove themselves to be so over and over and are really violent and aggressive and don't have empathy for other people. At the other end of the spectrum, you have people who have ended up on the wrong side of the law for whatever reason, but they're not actually terribly dangerous for the future. Of course, this is a spectrum. You have everybody in between. The really important part is to figure out how can we get good at having good prediction about this stuff. As I said, it will never be 100% prediction. That's not even the goal. It's not even possible. But that's the goal, is to have a customized system.